Hello, this is Michael Telinger. Welcome to Contact in the Desert 2021. I'm talking to you from South Africa, right in the heart of the ancient vanished civilizations and the millions of ancient stone ruins that you find scattered around the mountains right around me. I'm literally right in the heart of it all. And for those that are new to my work, let me dump this on you right now. We are right in the middle of the largest concentration of ancient ruins found anywhere on Earth. Yes, South Africa, unbeknown to most of the world and most that study ancient civilizations, South Africa is actually the home to the largest concentration of ancient ruins and vanished civilizations found anywhere on Earth to date. And quite frankly, based on my research and my observations for the last 14 years, I don't know if we're going to find anything as dense and as complex and as mind-blowing, intriguing, and inviting as the ancient stone ruins of Southern Africa. So take a journey of discovery with me. That's exactly what we're going to do. And we're going to connect the dots to see how we can make sense of the past so that it can benefit us into the future. And that's ultimately what my work and my research is all about. I don't just focus on the past, the ancient civilizations and the mysteries of the past that are unveiling more and more surprises virtually on a daily basis. But I'm also very interested in what we're going to do with this information into the future. So let us continue. I'm going to be covering subjects like sound, resonance, and also obviously creation, the big subject. How does all this come about? We're going to talk about the ancient ruins and vanished civilizations of Southern Africa, and especially South Africa, where I'm located. We're going to talk about ancient advanced technology and how these vanished civilizations have left behind technology that we're only rediscovering and have only rediscovered in recent times. And this is one of the great surprises that has certainly surprised me. And I know that pretty much everyone that comes to my museum or anyone that takes tours with me of the ancient ruins and vanished civilizations is always absolutely blown away by this very basic and blatant advanced technology that is lying everywhere. And since we don't really understand what technology they used, we keep ignoring it. And this is why, because of its simplicity, this ancient advanced technology and the knowledge about the laws of nature has gone unnoticed for so many, I guess, hundreds of years. So the outcome of this presentation is really going to be, where do we go from here? What do we do with this knowledge and information? And that's when I'll touch upon the subject of the Ubuntu movement, philosophy of contributionism, and one small town can change the world. What has evolved over a 16-year period. A philosophy that can create abundance and prosperity for all of us based on the knowledge and information that we use from the past. So we'll be connecting the dots, as I said, from the past to the present and into the future. Look out and absorb, digest, and come up with plans and ideas, very simple plans and ideas of what we can learn from the past and how to best put it to use for humanity and for the benefit of every single one of us. And that's really what I find so exciting and compelling about the one small town philosophy, is how it embraces everybody, how it invites everybody. And I'm sure by the time we get to that, you'll feel the same way. So what happens when we start looking into the past is we realize that we literally are like little babies. We are newborn babies that are looking at the world, looking out of our cot, looking around us and wondering what the hell is going on, because we have no idea who we are, where we come from, and why we're here. And that is a very, very dangerous situation. The reason why it matters, why does it matter? Who are we? Where do we come from? And why are we here? Many people ask that. Say, well, what does it matter? I don't care. I just wake up in the morning and I live my life and I enjoy my life. Unfortunately, it's not as simple as that, because woven into our lives and what we do every day, how we react, how we interact with the people in our community, how the government interacts with us, and what happens in our lives, what we choose to do, what we are forced to do, and what we end up doing in our lives is part of the tragedy and the story that is unfolded, that is our reality. And I believe that it's very important and it does matter, because if we don't know who we are and where we come from, how could we possibly know where we are going? And that is a very important philosophy I'd like you to consider while we go through all of this. We are, and we have become, a species with amnesia. It's literally in the last 500 years that the global elite have really succeeded in turning us into a species with amnesia. And how do you create a species with amnesia? Is you separate people from their ancestors. Because for thousands of years, people have lived in communities and villages, and they've shared and handed down information and knowledge from generation to generation. It was a ritual, part of the customs, that they would hand down the knowledge, very well preserved and as accurately preserved and related and conveyed knowledge and information about their past, their ancestors, and so forth. Well, when the invasion of the world happened in the late 1400s from Europe, you know, when the thugs from Europe were literally sent out to invade the rest of the world, that's when the large onslaught on humanity happened, on the native people around the world, whether it was in the Americas, in Africa, in Asia, in Australia, all over the world. When the Europeans arrived and invaded, and it's not just the Europeans, it would have been others as well, the Arabs and the Chinese, but that's a whole nother discussion again. But when the people in boats arrived and took over the lands of those that lived there, that's when they started the cleansing. They got rid of all the knowledge, information, and they literally beat it out of the people. They separated the people from their ancestors. You burn their books, you burn their writing, whatever they had, materials that they had that they held on to dearly, and you destroy the connection to the ancestors. And that's how, over a 500-year period, since the late 1400s, the global elite have come very close to creating an absolute species with amnesia. Fortunately, there are still shamans and people that have held on to their traditions and held on to their knowledge of their ancestors, that have passed on that knowledge and information. Fortunately for us, that still exists. Otherwise, we'd be in deep, deep trouble. And it is very difficult to figure out what's going on and who we are, where we come from, and why we're here. And it also, the other big thing is, it makes us very vulnerable to lies and manipulation. Because if we don't know these facts, then our governments can lie to us, our authorities can lie to us, our partners can lie to us, whatever the situation is we find ourselves in, we become and are a very vulnerable group of beings. And we are open to lies and manipulation on a scale right now that most of us cannot even fathom, especially right now, what we've gone through since 2020. The lies, manipulations, and tragedy that is unfolded around the world, the misery, the pain, and the suffering that billions of people are undergoing right now and are right in the center of, is unimaginable. And much of that is just a continuation of the lies and manipulation that has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. So let's carry on to asking those three fundamental questions again from a slightly different perspective. Who are we? Where do we come from? And why are we here? Now, that could be interpreted in two different ways. Who are we? Where do we come from? Why are we here as human beings? How did we arrive here? What are we doing on Earth? And what is this Earth all about? But it could also be viewed from a slightly broader perspective. What is the universe? Where does the universe come from? How do we fit into the universe? How does our species and all the other species around us fit into the universe? Not just us as humanity, but all other creation around us. And that question always starts at this beginning. So let us go to this very beginning and talk about this theory that's been shoved down our throats, this theory called the Big Bang Theory. Now, we all know about the Big Bang Theory. There are TV shows about it. There are books written about it. I want to point out to you that it's got the word theory in it. It's the Big Bang Theory. But this is what mainstream science does. Now, keep in mind, science is supposed to be all about knowledge, sharing knowledge and information. Science, that's where the origins of word is. Science, it comes from the word knowledge, right? So anyone who's knowledgeable about anything is actually a scientist. You don't have to have a white coat and work in a lab or have some weird degree that allows you or permits you or certifies you that you're now a scientist. If you're very good at what you do, you are a scientist, you're knowledgeable about that subject. So you automatically are a scientist in your field. You don't need a degree to do that. But so mainstream academia, and the mainstream has hijacked this word called science and scientists, and they've put the label onto some people that they choose. They choose these people that they call scientists, and then they make us all look towards the scientists for answers. So we've seen in the last 2 years how the scientists keep getting it wrong, and how the people who should know the answers don't have the answers, and how many of the answers and solutions actually keep coming from the people that keep getting rejected. So just place some of these things through your mind, how they've been unfolding over the last 2 years, and what's been going on in the world and in your life, in your town, and your city, and your country, wherever you might be. So let's start at the very beginning. Go to the Big Bang Theory and this thing called the singularity, because that's what the mainstream science and astrophysics and cosmologists tell us, that everything in creation comes from this single point, the singularity, a very, very infinite, dense point into which everything in the known universe was compressed. So, and then this thing exploded, and it exploded into what we now see around us as the known universe. So we got to ask ourselves, first of all, this, as far as I'm concerned, is possibly as close to pseudoscience as one could get. Taking a theory that has really no explanation and making it a fact. So I like to bring you to this question. What is the singularity? What are we actually looking at? And what are we detecting when we detect this so-called origins of the universe, the known universe around us, this single point of singularity? What are we detecting? This infinite point of density from which everything comes. And I think you'll find this very, very important and very interesting, because that's where we are going. By the end of this presentation, I trust that you'll be as excited about the answers as I am, because we're starting to decode the true nature of reality, how things really work, and how the things around us that we witness and interact with in this 3D world that we find ourselves in, how these things actually come into being, how they manifest into physical form, and how this theory of a singularity actually has far deeper meaning and a deeper comprehension that we can get into and start to make sense of the world around us and the role that we play in this world around us. So we're going to come back to this from a slightly different angle a little bit later. The whole story of the Big Bang is always divided into the argument between two groups, the evolutionists and the creationists, evolution and creation. Now, this is this argument that's been going on for a long time. And yet, it's a relatively new argument, believe it or not, because ancient civilizations did not necessarily believe in evolution. They believed in creation, but we'll come back to that as well. So evolutionists, which at this stage mostly fall into the mainstream media and mainstream academia, rather, and that is a very sad state of affairs, because anyone that steps outside of the realm of evolution, any academic that starts to even contemplate creation or intelligent design, suffers from very harsh consequences. And there's a great documentary that I'd like to recommend you watch, which is hosted by Ben Stein. It's called Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed. And please find that documentary and watch it. See what happens to academics, PhDs, Nobel Prize winners and laureates, the moment that they speak or suggest creation or intelligent design, what happens to their careers? It is a very sad state of affairs how mainstream academia has completely hijacked this this thing called evolution, and they don't allow anything else to enter the bastion of the academic domain. So evolutionists and the theory of evolution really comes down to the Big Bang. The Big Bang is the mother of evolution at this stage, because everything comes from there. And what we are told, that everything in the universe, the visible, the observable, the detectable universe, everything in it comes from tiny little particles and is a consequence of random cosmic collisions between these particles. Now, an infinite number of particles that are out there flying around and bumping into each other, and the random act of them bumping into each other creates DNA, it creates cells, it creates organisms, it creates you and me, it creates planets, it creates galaxies, supercluster galaxies, it creates water, it creates everything in the known universe. It comes from random, accidental coincidence of particles bumping into each other. Now, you can, if you have any kind of knowledge of science or physics, or biology, and especially genetics, and contemplate consciousness, you'll realize that that is possibly the most pseudoscientific argument anyone could put out there. It is just reaching for answers because you don't have any. And this remains a huge problem in our lives, because it affects everything we do in our schools and universities, is this principle that everything comes from this random act of particles bumping into each other. Now, I've often been, I often joke about, saying, well, I start bumping my hands together like this, and eventually people say, what are you doing? And I say, well, I'm making a rabbit. I say, what do you mean you're making a rabbit? So, well, everything comes from random act of particles bumping into each other. Well, I've jumped that evolutionary step 100 billion trillion zillion times, because I'm now bumping cells against each other, cells of DNA and of the complexity of cells. And if I do this for another 100 trillion zillion times, I will create a rabbit, because it'll be particles bumping into each other and creating a rabbit. That's what I'm intending to do. Now, you can imagine how well, I hope that just me doing this for you and imagining random particles bumping into each other and eventually creating everything in creation. Just think about how ludicrous that idea is. Okay. And I'm tired of bumping my hands together now, hitting my hands together now. So let's move on to the next argument, and that is creation. And creationists believe that there's a higher consciousness, a consciousness behind everything, and all-knowingness behind all of creation. Some people call it God, some people call it the source code, some people call it the creator. And that this consciousness is behind everything that we observe. And it's fascinating, because Max Planck actually made that statement as well, arguably the father of quantum mechanics or particle physics. Max Planck, that's the father of the quantum leap, showing us that an electron can disappear in one place and suddenly reappear in another place, basically proving to us that biolocation is possible. Max Planck, Nobel Prize winner that most people in the world know about today, was very vocal about this field of consciousness. And Max Planck said that nothing gets behind consciousness. Consciousness is the primordial source of everything. And let's pay attention to what Max Planck had to say about consciousness, and the fact that an electron can disappear in one place and reappear in another place virtually instantaneously, and the whole thing of action at a distance shows us there's a hidden activity and a hidden action behind this reality that we face and the reality we find ourselves in. So it's important that ancient civilizations actually believed that the universe and the heavens were created. I don't know of any ancient civilization. I have not discovered or found any ancient civilization that talks about evolution. That is a relatively new concept that was introduced into our education system. And trying to make the old people, ancient civilizations, appear stupid for thinking that things were created, that things just manifest, that there's a higher intelligence behind everything. And that's where it gets really interesting and often very dirty. And what's important, that the universe was created through sound and words. Even in the Bible, we learn about the word God said, let there be light. And you'll find when you study this that pretty much every ancient civilization, certainly everyone that I've studied and come across, the further back you go and you eventually stumble upon their creation theories and how the world and the universe came to be, you will find those words either about sound, resonance, or frequency, how the Creator brought forth the universe and everything in it through either sound or vibration or resonance. So let's talk about sound, because sound is at the source of everything. It's the centerpiece of creation through pretty much all ancient civilizations, including the Bible. Sound is an infinitely powerful tool. Our ears are miracles of nature, and we don't think about it. We're surrounded by sound. Everything around us gives off sound. The way you breathe, the way the clothes rub against each other, the noises the chair makes when you sit on it, the noise it makes when you drink water. And when you put down your glass of water, there you can hear the sound it makes. You hear cars, we hear sound, we hear wind, we hear birds. Even if you sit in absolute silence, there is still sound around you. It is virtually impossible to block out all the sound. And if you do block out all the sound and you find yourself in that situation, you will go crazy, because our ears play an integral part to energizing our bodies, energizing the trillions of cells in our bodies, and keeping us connected to the environment around us. Really important. And it's not just the sound, it's the resonance. Remember, when we talk about sound, sound is how we perceive resonance and vibration in this density of ours. We perceive it as sound, but in essence, it's caused by a resonance and a vibration that creates frequency, and then we perceive it as sound. So those vibrations and the sound actually hits our skin, it hits our hair, it hits parts of our body. We feel it, it goes into our organs. You know, when you listen to music, loud music, and the sub basses, how it moves your organs and sometimes can make you feel sick. So we're intimately and inextricably connected to sound. And our ears are literal miracles of nature. So we often believe that sound is invisible because, you know, if we can't see it, we don't believe it. Often people say, well, if I can't see it and I can't touch it, then it doesn't exist. Well, that is the most ridiculous thing to say. And those are clearly people that haven't figured out how things really work. You know, so you know how it goes. You tell people something and say, oh, that's rubbish, I don't believe it. You know, show me some proof. Unless I can see it and feel it and touch it, it doesn't exist. You know, so my argument there is, so if you think that you can't see it and can't feel it and can't touch it, you must be a big for not thinking that that exists. And often people get the message. So is sound visible or is it invisible? Fascinating question. And that's something that actually becomes a deeply illuminating answer once we realize what sound is and what sound causes. So as I mentioned, we take sound for granted. It's all around us all the time, and we hardly ever stop to ask ourselves, how does the sound affect us, when it actually is the fundamental source of everything we find ourselves surrounded by in this reality. Our ears are incredibly complex instruments. It's truly, and I say it again, a miracle of nature. The nervous endings that are connected, the nerve endings that are connected to our ears and come from our ears are so complex, and they pretty much connect our ears to the entire body, to every organ, every cell in our body is eventually connected to our ears. And this is why we respond so violently sometimes when certain sounds happen and some things happen, how we react to the sounds around us. It's because of how the sound is connected. Our ears are connected to pretty much all the organs and muscles in our bodies. Think about it. You hear a sound and you jump. It's your muscles that react. So there must be nerve endings connected to our muscles. Otherwise, we wouldn't jump and react. Right? So just think about that for a while and realize how powerful our ears and the sound is in our reaction and our survival mode. And not just for us, for animals and many other activities that go around us. So incredibly complex network of nerves that connect our ears to pretty much our entire body. And just to remind us of some of the basic uses of sounds that we often don't think about. The doctors, when you go to a doctor, the first thing a doctor does is take out a stethoscope, right? And he starts to listen to your chest, how you breathe, and the movement, if your blood is flowing properly and so forth, but mostly your breathing. And we can say a lot from the breathing in your lungs. So ultrasound images of pregnant women and the uterus and the baby, how the baby grows in the uterus, that's ultrasound, right? Car engines inspections, very advanced labs and motor manufacturers now use sound to detect what problems there are with their engines. That's the most sophisticated way of testing some of the problems with engines. Movie soundtracks. I mean, if it wasn't for movie soundtracks, the movie would just be emotionless. There would be no connection between us and the visuals we see. It's the sound that makes the movie actually work. Creates emotion or energy in motion. So emotion really stands for energy in motion. If we look at whales and dolphins and other creatures in the ocean that communicate by making incredible sounds and singing these long songs that travel thousands of kilometers underwater around the world, they communicate with sound frequencies and vibrational notes and tones. It's incredible how nature around us is interconnected with sound, and we simply don't think about it. Bats, how bats navigate and hunt. It's a miracle how they do that. And then for me, the most important connection and the dots that we connect is how light is an aspect of sound and how sound actually manifests light, because often people get it the wrong way around. Often people think, they talk about light, let the light come in, let the light come in. Yes, it's important. But if it wasn't for resonance, the source code of resonance and creation, we would not have light. And you'll see how important that statement is. Because, let me just go back to this, because even in the Bible, it says, God said, let there be light. So sound creates light. It is an instantaneous thing. So sound instantaneously creates light. So sound and light are inextricably connected. Every sound frequency has a light frequency attached to it. We can't see it, but we know it's there. And vice versa. Every light frequency has a sound frequency attached to it. Pay attention to this. This is very important. You can't have one without the other. It is a huge breakthrough and allows us to make huge leaps in comprehending the universe around us and how we can communicate and interact with that. The relationship between sound and light. Michael Rubenstein, for a long time now, has shown us how we can actually use light or film to detect sound. They've done so many different experiments. I suggest you go look at Mike Rubenstein's work. It is absolutely breakthrough science, and I trust it's being used by secret labs in ways that we don't know about. But what they've really done is they film like a packet of crisps and play music to it without a microphone. So the camera has no microphone. So they just play music to the packet of crisps, empty packet of crisps, and by detecting the tiny vibrations and how the packet moves from the sound vibrations that hit it, they can create the sound from filming these tiny disturbances. So we can actually detect sound from the light that we film through the visual aspect of it. Think about what this means and the connectivity between light and sound. Very important breakthrough discovery that. So what is sound really? Well, sound is the thing that created the heavens and the earth. Ancient civilizations tell us this. The Bible tells us that. And I find it fascinating that it says the Spirit of God moved over the waters. Let's pay attention to that first opening phrase of the Bible. The Spirit of God moved over the waters, and God said, let there be light. What I find fascinating is there's water. Nothing has been created yet, and yet there is water. We're going to come back to that because therein potentially lies a very unexpected and a huge breakthrough realization what the universe might be. Is it possible that the universe is actually filled with water? Is it a crazy idea? Or is water the ultimate consciousness that holds everything in place? And the more you study water, the more you look at water, the more you realize that there's a very strong possibility that that might be the case. Let's carry on. Nikola Tesla, that the source of all, Nikola Tesla said and was very clear about, is that source of all creation is energy, resonance, and vibration. Or he said energy, frequency, and vibration. Those are the secrets of the universe. But I call it energy, resonance, and frequency. And when we study that, everything becomes very clear to us what is going on around us. And that is the study of sound. The study of sound is called cymatics, or studying the shape of sound. And many of you will be familiar with this. The shape of sound is a very important breakthrough discovery, how every sound frequency has its own particular shape. It's called prime resonance frequency. So it doesn't matter what frequency you find, it will have its own very unique, distinct pattern and shape that it makes. The way to visualize sound manifesting into physical form is, as I said, the study of cymatics, but by putting sand on a metal plate and you put sound frequencies through the metal plate, many of you will be familiar with this, you get these beautiful shapes that are created. That's called cymatics. Every sound frequency has its own shape. Here's a great example how water manifests sound if you shine light at it, and how the light shows us the frequencies in water through a sound, how sound manifests in water. And this becomes very important later when we talk about certain architectural structures. So here's a great example of 432 hertz and 440 hertz and the different patterns that they make, that subtle frequency difference, and yet the shape is very, very different. The cymatic pattern of that sound frequency is very, very different. And some more examples of different frequencies and the shapes that they form. This is a brilliant work of John Stuart Reid from cymoscope.com, the inventor of the cymoscope. Please go into his website, have a look at his incredible work, how he shows this. These are the musical scales, very important, how every frequency, every note has its own specific cymatic pattern, its own shape. And these are just two-dimensional views. So what does sound look like in 3D? Well, Dr. Manjir Samantha Lawton, in her beautiful, fantastic book that I recommend to everyone to read, Punk Science, shows us how everything manifests as a torus shape or in a toroidal field, sometimes called black holes. I know that she calls it black holes. Many astrophysicists and cosmologists have identified black holes, and they talk about these black holes as these terrible things that devour everything and destroy everything. Well, that is a complete misconception. Torus fields, or the sources of creation, how sound manifests in toroidal fields, these perfectly balanced toroidal fields, where energy spins in one direction and another direction, and you have this perfectly balanced toroidal field, or a torus shape, or a donut shape, for those that don't know what I'm talking about. Those are often called black holes, and these donut shapes and these toroidal fields are fundamentally the source of creation from which everything comes. And this becomes very obvious when you start studying everything around us, from galaxies to solar systems to all kinds of things, to atoms to electrons. Everything is a torus shape. Everything manifests as a torus, or call it a black hole. So when we talk about torsion fields or vortex fields, it's all the same things. Okay, so don't think it's fancy names for different things. It actually refers to the same thing. Vortex fields, toroidal fields, torsion fields, the same thing. Sound manifests as a torus. Here's a wonderful little image of a torus field. You can see it going in that donut kind of situation that you have, but it gets far more interesting and far more exciting than just this image right here. And this is why these torus fields are so important to our environment and to us. Keep in mind that every time your heart beats, the sound of your heart creates this powerful torus, this powerful toroidal field around your body. And this toroidal field is a moving sound, moving field of sound, moving torus of sound. And what happens to moving sound? Moving sound creates magnetic fields. So this is the sequence of progression of creation. The opening phrase of the Bible actually gives us that. and it's a crash course in quantum mechanics. God said, let there be light. So it's the sound of creation that creates this beautiful torus, and this moving sound in the torus, because sound does not stand still, sound moves, and it's this moving and pulsating toroidal shape of the sound that creates magnetic fields, and that then creates a perfectly balanced magnetic torus, and the moving magnetic fields create electromagnetic fields. And this is why when our heart beats, it not only creates a sound toroidal field around our bodies, but also an electromagnetic field around our bodies. And this is why we can interact with nature around us. If we become sensitive enough, we can interact with everything around us. And this is why we affect each other. You can walk into a room and say, wow, I didn't say at the party there was a bad vibration. Because you walk into a room and you can feel there's a good energy or there's a bad energy. Your energetic toroidal field picks up on that. And the closer you get, the more powerful it gets. You know, when someone gets in your face and that you feel affronted, right? So the further they are, the less effect it has. But the closer people get to you, the more you can feel their energy. And this is because of the electromagnetic toroidal fields around our bodies. And that all comes from our heartbeat and the many different sounds we make. Think of the trillions of cells in your body every time you breathe, everything that makes a noise in our bodies. Each one of those actions creates a tiny torus of sound, and that affects the other sound around it. So it's this integrated network of fractal toroidal fields of sound that together create a powerful magnetic field, that together create a powerful electromagnetic field. This is the important role that sound plays in our lives and in our reality. Every sound we make, every letter of the alphabet has its own toroidal shape, specific shape. This has been researched in great detail, and just what we do, because we don't study it, we're not aware of it. What's also important is that sound is actually a scalar tool. And since sound is harmonic, well, first of all, scalar means scalar technology and scalar research, scalar energy is the buzzword, scalar energy and scalar technology. Well, what does that mean? Scalar means harmonic. Harmonic resonant or resonant harmonics, scales like musical scales. When you play musical scale, any musician will understand this. Musical scales, scalar, it means it's harmonic, it's resonant, and this is why sound is such an important role, because sound is a primordial scalar tool and scalar source of energy. Konstantin Mail is a German professor, academic, that has shown how on a little desktop experiment that he shows how sound moves faster than the speed of light in his little scalar demonstration that he puts up on a tabletop. And this is just spectacular. Often we are sort of bamboozled by the terms and expressions, and we hear a new word like quantum mechanics, and we want, wow, it's for the clever people. We'll never understand what that is. No. Everybody should understand, and everybody already does understand. You're just not even aware that you understand how simple quantum mechanics is. We don't understand how simple scalar energy and scalar technology actually is, because we think it's only for the clever people that study this for years, and only after years of study you'll come to understand it. That is not the case. All of us already know this. It is within us. We are part of this scalar energy, this scalar technology. But it's been locked down by academia and by secret industrial military complex research labs that work on this technology, and they don't share that with the rest of the world. So understand that it is a lot simpler than we realize. It's all around us. Think about the scalar vortex torus effect, right? Think about it like Russian dolls, one doll within another. So one donut, one torus, and another torus, bigger torus, and a bigger torus. And they all connect at that very center, at that 0 point of that torus field. That's really important, because that's where we're going. That's where we're going, right? That's where this recognition and realization is really going to end. But think of these Russian dolls, or these donut shapes, one within each other. But think of them going infinitely out and infinitely in. But then they become even more integrated, because you got smaller ones connecting from this side and from that side, and it becomes a very exciting interconnected toroidal field that surrounds us in the entire universe. Even light, has a toroidal shape, because light comes from sound, and sound and light are inextricably connected. So every light frequency will have a sound frequency, and that light combined with sound will have its own toroidal shape. That is well defined and well studied and well recognized. So electrons are toruses, atoms are toruses, solar systems are toruses, everything around us is a torus, and our galaxies are toruses, are toroidal fields. We are in the center of an infinite toroidal fractal field that makes up the nature of our reality. And I believe that that is the source of all creation, and it's infinitely works infinitely inwards, and it works infinitely outwards. There is no end, both out and or in. So when we look at our galaxy, when we look at our solar system, when we look at our universe, and we find that singularity, what is it that we're looking at? I think you already know the answer to that. But this is a fantastic drawing by Alex Gray that depicts the very complex, integrated, fractal nature of toroidal fields. I don't think we could ever take photographs of it. This is an artistic impression that is just a spectacular work of art. Eric Rankin shows us how harmonics affects the sound of shapes, and shows us how every platonic shape, when you take the angles and you convert those into frequencies, how every platonic shape gives off a beautiful sound frequency. And when you combine those sound frequencies, they give us a beautiful harmonic resonant chord, a chord in F sharp major. So it seems that the natural shapes that are formed, or the sacred geometric patterns that are formed in nature, sing or play in the key of F sharp major. Well, that's certainly what Eric Rankin has discovered. Now, is it possible that the universe is tuned to F sharp major? Well, at this stage, it seems like it. And Eric's work points very strongly to that realization. And this, I believe that this is why musicians often get this study of sound and cymatics a lot easier than people that don't have musical knowing or musical knowledge or musical training. So what has this got to do with ancient ruins and ancient civilizations? Everything. Because the ancient civilizations and the ancient ruins of Southern Africa have everything to do with sound. So let's look at these vanished civilizations of Southern Africa and what they left behind to mesmerize and intrigue us. They left behind more than 10 million of these circular stone ruins. And from the aerial photographs, you'll realize that every stone circle, as they've become known, is completely unique. And they're all connected with these channels that look like pathways. No stone circle stands alone. So it's an integrated network of millions of circular structures connected to each other into a large grid. And these millions of structures cover large parts of South Africa, large parts of Zimbabwe, and some of our neighboring countries like Botswana, Mozambique, Swaziland, and so forth. And that's also where we find some of the ancient activities like the gold mines and so much more. This is the largest cluster of stone ruins found anywhere on Earth. I have not yet found anything remotely as large and expanded or expansive as the stone ruins of Southern Africa anywhere on Earth. It's possible that they exist, but we haven't found them yet, and I certainly haven't found them yet. I have found very similar structures to the stone circles right across the world, but nothing as dense and as concentrated and as vast as the stone ruins of Southern Africa. So we're dealing with a very unique and a mind-blowing phenomenon. The engineering that must have gone into this, not must have gone, that had gone into this, the technology, the know-how, the labor, the effort, the engineering that's gone into putting these structures together over such a large area is unimaginable to us today. We couldn't do it today because there's not enough money in the world to put something like this together. And we'll talk about the money thing a little bit later and how that affects our lives. So what are the stone circles for? As you start looking at them from the aerial photographs, and it is really the aerial photography that has exposed a lot of the hidden secrets of the ancient cultures, ancient civilizations, and the ancient structures that they left behind to actually tell us what these things are. Since we've already looked at cymatics and the study of sound and cymatics, and our sound manifests into physical form, like sand on a metal plate, you realize very quickly that what you're looking at here are just gigantic cymatic patterns. Cymatic patterns from Earth. Every stone circle is a representation of the sound frequency that comes out of the Earth at that specific point. And this is not something that I think it is, not a theory. We know it is because of the repetitive measurements and the discovery of the sound frequencies that emanate from the stone walls. We measured very powerful frequencies of sound and magnetic fields and electromagnetic fields and waves that come out of these stone circles. And what's fascinating is that every time we go back with different instruments, new instruments, because we don't always have the same instruments, because people come from all places and they bring their instruments and we go there and measure these, we find that the measurements vary and the measurements keep changing. And that's a very exciting discovery. That shouldn't be disturbing. It's actually exciting because what that tells us that the stone circles are still alive. They're still working today, even in their terrible state of disrepair and broken downedness. They are still functioning. They're still generating energy. So as the sound, you just go back and look at these patterns, the sound comes out of the earth. And at that point, we have the stones that are placed on the shape of that sound as it emanates from the earth. Remember that the higher the frequency, the more compressed and compact the shape, the cymatic shape is. The lower the frequency, the bigger the pattern and the bigger the shape becomes. So we're dealing with sound frequencies that create cymatic patterns, anything between the range of about 5 meters or so up to 150 meters. So that should give us an indication of the frequencies that are actually responsible for creating these stone circles and the cymatic shapes that they represent. Then they're all connected together, and since they generate sound frequencies, the sound comes from the earth, it goes into the stone walls. The stone walls are filled with stones that ring like bells, that resonate. They conduct that sound. The sound moves because sound doesn't stand still. The sound moves, and as the sound moves, it creates magnetic fields, just like in the toroidal field creation story, right? So the sound comes into the walls, creates magnetic fields, and because the sound moves and therefore creates moving magnetic fields, we get the generation of electromagnetic fields. And that's why we detect all three: sound, magnetic fields, and electromagnetic fields coming out of the stone circles and out of the walls. This is showing us that whoever constructed them have an acute knowledge of sound, resonance, frequency, and electromagnetism. So we're dealing with a vanished advanced technology by a vanished civilization that built this and left it behind and simply vanished. We need to ask, what was it for? So let's continue. Adam's calendar is part of this. Adam's calendar was rediscovered in 2003 by Johann Heine. It's an ancient site that is so broken down, but it's probably one of the most important sites in the world. It's certainly, for me, the most important site in South Africa as far as ancient sites and ancient civilizations and ancient technology, because Adam's calendar is a powerful energy generating device. We have measured powerful measurements there of sound, magnetic fields, and electromagnetic fields that are much higher than any of the stone circles. And it's also fascinating where Adam's calendar is actually positioned, right on the edge of an ancient gold mine. And we'll come back to that just in a little while. So it's important that we also recognize some of the other technology that's encoded in the stone ruins. For example, when you find stone circles built in these flower-shaped ruins, anyone that knows anything about electrical engineering or electronics, and you see these flower shapes, you realize very quickly that we're dealing with magnetrons, magnetron technology. Magnetrons are very powerful energy generating devices. They're used in generating laser beams and all kinds of technology, very high end. And it's in the microwaves. Every microwave has got a little magnetron that actually drives it, right? So that's how advanced and powerful magnetron technology is. Just imagine how much energy a magnetron that is 50 meters in diameter would have generated. And we don't just have one of those, we have thousands of those that are connected into the grid like this. You can see the channel there, the channel that runs into the magnetron and runs down and connects to a much bigger channel that runs along, which connects to all the other stone circles in that particular area of the mountain. So once we recognize that we have magnetron technology, we realize that whoever built this really knew what they were doing. And these magnetrons somehow generated huge amounts of energy that we're sharing and putting into the grid through the channels. See the channels as wires that connect them all together. That's literally what it is. Resonating wires that connect the energy, whether it's resonance, whether it's sound, whether it's electromagnetic energy, whichever form they used, they connected all the stone circles together. And so it's a giant energy grid generating unimaginable amounts of energy. Nikola Tesla rediscovered this, thousands of years later. We believe that these stone circles go back about 300,000 years and possibly further back in time. I'm not going to go into the reasons why in this lecture, but there are many more of my lectures on YouTube and also on my channel on michaeltelinger.com. Please go there and sign up to my private channel where you get hundreds of hours of videos that go into many more lectures and explanations and live discoveries. But Nikola Tesla just rediscovered what these structures were giving us thousands and thousands of years ago, realizing that the earth rings like a bell. The earth constantly puts out energy and sound frequencies, and Nikola Tesla tapped into that. And that was the invisible source that drove his free energy devices. The question is, what was the energy all about? What was the energy for? And for many years, I believed that the energy was for the gold mining, and I still believe that aspects of it and parts of it were used for the ancient gold mining that I'm going to get to now. But more recent discoveries and considerations are suggesting that the sheer size of this engineering feat, it is too big just to work for gold mining and whatever mining activity was going on here. It must have been a much bigger purpose for it as well. And the determination to build such a huge machine, this energy generating machine, must have probably had a more serious reason behind it. And I'm beginning to believe that it had something to do with geoengineering, terraforming, and climate control to change the climate, to make the climate on Earth more habitable for those that created these stone circle structures. Because what we find is many thousands of years later, or there's a period after the stone circles were constructed, that rivers were formed, rivers come down the mountains, and those rivers wash away the channels, the stone circles, and the terraces that we find them nested in and nestled in, and the rivers wash away those that suggest us that the rivers are younger than the stone circles, the terraces, and the channels. So we can determine how old the rivers are, more or less, and therefore the stone circles are older than that. So I suggest that there was a climate shift and a climate change after the stone circles were constructed, and that may have been because they did affect the climate and they did affect the atmosphere in ways that then changed the climate of the world. But one of the things that was certainly going on here was gold mining, and there are many references in the ancient Sumerian texts and the gold mining in southern Africa. The Sumerian texts talk about the Anunna gods that became known as the Anunnaki. Many people are familiar with that. And the Anunnaki that were led by their leader called Enki, or their grand architect, who was responsible for all the gold mining on Earth. And wherever these Anunnaki came from, they were very advanced beings. They had knowledge of all this technology, and I ascribe all this activity, or most of this activity in Southern Africa, to the presence and the activity of the Anunnaki under the leadership of Enki. And we can start connecting the stone circles, the technology, and also the gold mining, the ancient gold mining that's just spread right across Southern Africa, thousands and thousands of ancient gold mines and huge amounts of gold that was mined here. So what we read about is the work in the Abzu. Abzu is often referred to as the place where the gold came from. And this is what we recognize, what I've certainly recognized as Southern Africa. Sometimes they differentiate between the Abzu and the deep Abzu. So when they talk about the Abzu, they might be referring, and when I say they, I mean the Sumerian texts and the translations thereof. When they talk about the Abzu, they might be referring to Zimbabwe today, and the deep Abzu further south, away from the north, where Iraq and Mesopotamia, where the Anunnaki and the Sumerian civilization was active and influenced. And further south of Zimbabwe, or further away, would be referred to as the deep Abzu. And you often find those subtle distinctions in their references. So there are Sumerian translations that talk about Enki, the Anunnaki leader, and they plan to create the Adam race, or a slave, to be the slave in the gold mines. This is one of the translations. And that's a Sumerian seal there that depicts the creation of Adam. And very important connections and dots that we are connecting between the Sumerian culture, the Anunnaki and how they influence the Sumerians, and then the activity of the Sumerian or the Anunnaki, possibly some Sumerians here in Southern Africa. And the translation says, a primitive worker shall be created. Our command will he understand. Our tools he will handle. To the Anunnaki in the Abzu, relief shall come. So clearly, we read about the Anunnaki. We read about a primitive creature, a worker that is being cloned or created, that they'll be teaching them how to use the tools so they can relieve the Anunnaki from the gold mining in the Abzu. And the Abzu, the Anunnaki in the Abzu, relief shall come, the gold mining region. It's fascinating that Credo Mutwa, African preeminent shaman, is acutely aware of the Anunnaki. And it's obvious that African shamans that are trained in the shamanic tradition and knowledge have held the knowledge and handed down this knowledge and information for thousands of years. And Credo Mutwa was just one of them. I had the privilege of meeting him on several occasions, and he shared a lot of very important news and information with me of the Anunnaki, the gold mining, and the creation of humanity as the slave race, to be the slaves for the Anunnaki in the gold mines. And it just happens that Credo Mutwa was initiated at Adam's calendar in 1937 as a young man, and he calls Adam's calendar the Inzalo Yelanga in Zulu. It's called Inzalo Yelanga, which means birthplace of the sun, where humanity was created by the gods to be the slaves in the gold mines. And a lot more about that, obviously. We read about Enki's mines and the technology in the Sumerian text. We read about the earth splitter. The earth splitter there Enki established within the earth a gash to make. By way of tunnels, earth's innards to reach, the golden veins to uncover. These are all very important words encoded with a lot of information. And as you break them down, which I'm not going to do here in this lecture, you start to realize how deep this knowledge goes, what they mean by golden veins, what they mean by tunnels, what is the earth splitter, and so forth. Well, it clearly tells us that Enki had advanced technology. Here they refer to it as the earth splitter. It was some advanced technology that they could do all kinds of things in the gold mining and make the tunnels and get the gold out, find the veins, and so forth. But it goes a lot further. It shows us that I believe that the magnetrons are actually possibly references or the remains of what the Sumerian text called the earth splitter. Because if you look at this Sumerian drawing, or it's not a drawing, it's a seal, or one of those Sumerian seals, those little round tubes that you press into clay, and then they give you these beautiful imprints. And this is an image of Enki sitting on his throne, somebody holding up a flag with some sort of a grid up in the sky. But what's fascinating is how the little magnetron symbols, the little, those little flower-shaped symbols that represent magnetrons, just like this. That's a drawing, an engineering drawing of a magnetron. And there's a giant stone circle, 50 meters in diameter. That's a giant magnetron. So it's possible that in these Sumerian seals that depict Enki, they're showing us that they were using magnetron technology and magnetron energy for all kinds of things, possibly also holding some sort of a grid up in the sky, which is important to contemplate where we're going to get to that. So the stone circles are not the only ancient energy generating devices. It seems that most ancient megalithic sites were for generating energy via sound, resonance, and also light. And this is really, the stone circles for me were the catalyst to realize that. At the moment I started to look at other ancient sites around the world, the penny dropped very quickly because you start to see things very differently. We also deal with stones that ring like bells. Keep in mind that stones have high silica and crystal content, and this is why they can hold and store memory. We're basically dealing with Stone Age silicon-based technology. That's what stones actually are. We just extract the active ingredient to put it into what we call fiber optics and an advanced technology, when the source of the technology is actually in the stones and the rocks around us and in nature around us, like everything, the medicine and so forth. So keep in mind that we can store digital data in crystals. Infinite amount of digital data can be stored in crystals. So we can see ancient stone structures as basically memory banks, Stone Age memory banks and Stone Age Silicon Valley that holds a lot of ancient information encoded in the stones. And when you start looking at these ancient structures, it becomes very obvious that we're dealing with giant machines and technology on a gigantic scale, resonators, energy devices that are activated by both light and sound. We know that the pyramid has got shafts that are aligned to various stars and etc. And keep in mind that the light that comes in also has a sound frequency. So it's the light combined with sound, and that's at play here, but it's also the sound frequencies that come out of the ground that are resonating the entire structure. Here we have an image of the pyramids in Giza emanating some sort of energy. This was taken with a special lens that tell us that, again, even in their state of disrepair, they're still generating energy and putting out some sort of frequencies. The Chichen Itza pyramid puts out this was a famous photograph captured by a father taking a picture of his kids at Chichen Itza with this bright, powerful beam of light that just suddenly emerged for a very short period from this pyramid. We know that Stonehenge is a giant resonator. Many experiments have been done at Stonehenge to show that Stonehenge is built as a resonating device. There's no question. There can be no more question about that or questioning that. It is very obvious, just like the stone circles in South Africa and other parts of the world. Stonehenge was originally a very powerful energy generating, resonating device. And then we get to the advanced technology in Egypt, the temples of Egypt. It's advanced technology on a gigantic scale that we can't imagine, because we built technology and small advanced technology in computer chips and so forth. But when you start looking at the temples in Egypt and other ancient sites from the air, it becomes very clear that we're dealing with technology that we only rediscovered recently on a scale that we can't imagine. The obelisks are giant antennae. They ring like bells. They're all over Egypt, all over the ancient temples. The temples are filled with too many pillars. There's not enough space for people to congregate or worship or offer food or whatever, ask for forgiveness. So clearly, whoever occupied these temples at a later stage may have, or these structures, turned them into temples, and they were reoccupied and used for purposes that they were not originally built for. Just like the stone circles of South Africa, they have been reoccupied by migrating tribes and people that found them and used them for their own purpose. But the original structures, which I didn't mention earlier, have no doors and entrances. So we need to recognize that the original structures were not built for people or for cows or any other animals, because they don't have doors and entrances. But we find in some of them that have been adapted for people and tribes at a later stage, at a more recent time, to use and to occupy as dwellings, but that was not the original purpose. And the same must be said for the temples in Egypt, that whoever used them more recently used them for whatever they needed, but that was not their original intent. These are actually, when you start looking at them from the air, just like the stone circles and all ancient sites, that's when the true secrets are exposed. You realize that this is a very mysterious thing, like vibrating pillars on a giant foundation, and you see the ambient chambers, the temples, the chambers attached to the vibrating pillars, and you start to realize that the temples are actually templates for giant energy circuit boards. And the moment you've seen this once, you can never unsee it. It is very clear that we're dealing with gigantic silicon-based technology, vibrational energy, using quartz, using rock, using the energetic components of stones and rocks on a gigantic scale that we could never have imagined. And these are just some comparisons of some of the ancient temples around the world. This one is in Persia, in Iran, Persepolis, clearly showing us we're dealing with advanced technology. And when you compare microprocessors, you realize how these giant macro processors were probably used. And it just, again, once your eyes open to this and you see this, you can never unsee it. Becomes very, very obvious. I mean, look at these images of the Great Pyramid compared to the silicon, to a circuit board. It's very, very obvious what's going on here. We are just being babies waking up to the reality and the true history of the world that's been taking place and shaping itself around us that we're just waking up to. This is a great example. Abu Ghurab, another pyramid site close, not far from the Great Pyramids of Giza. And this is one of the greatest examples of a pyramid on a big platform, surrounded, it all built of quartz and stone and rock. And the pyramid sits right in front of this incredible platform that looks something like this. And for Star Trek fans, you realize this is probably as close as we're going to get to a beam me up Scotty device. And whatever this was used for, it is a highly advanced technological site that was totally destroyed. What blows my mind, and I don't often talk about it, is that how badly destroyed all these ancient sites are. It's, when you look at the sites, all these ancient temples in Egypt, you look at Pumapunku in South America, it's unbelievable. Somebody went to a lot of trouble to destroy these ancient sites, almost on purpose, so that they stop working, so they no longer function. And that's a whole separate discussion. So Sacsayhuaman is also, it's not a fortress or a mountaintop fortress, it's a mountaintop machine. A Sacsayhuaman is a spectacular example of another one of these ancient machines that was then reoccupied and used by more recent tribes. If you look at this this aerial image, you can clearly see this is an advanced technical drawing that you've got going there that we are just figuring out today. Angkor Wat is spectacular. That uses a combination of both rock, quartz, and water. And if you combine rock, quartz, and water, you get a very powerful combination. Borobudur in Indonesia is absolutely mind-blowing. It almost feels like it's vibrating while you look at it. And what's interesting, again, we have this constant repetition of the cones. The cones, either the steeples, the obelisks, and the antenna, and the cones on tops of churches, and these cone-shaped structures on tops of these ancient sites. And there must be a very specific reason. It's as if they're all pointing to the sky to push the energy through cone-shaped technology that turns Caesar beam technology to push that energy up into the sky. And that this is a repetitive theme in all the ancient structures. It just never changes. Then we get this circuit board at the Acropolis in Greece. You can very clearly see this is also originally a circuit board. The remaining temple on top there was the ambient chamber. It was then reused for other things. And it's, once again, it looks to us from studying this that it's somehow human sound was used in this whole equation, and that human sound was possibly used to activate some of these circuit boards or these machines so they would perform whatever they were supposed to perform. And I say that because many of these so-called circuit boards, giant circuit boards, have these perfect amphitheaters. If you look at that amphitheater, that's very clearly connected to the circuit board, and often you see them connected with all different kinds, whether it's a row of stones or a wall of stones or a row of pillars, vibrating pillars that connect from the amphitheater to the circuit board. And what you do is those amphitheaters are incredibly acoustic structures. You can whisper in there and everybody can hear you. Now, you don't need to build such an incredibly scientific stage if you want to entertain a bunch of Greeks with some, Greek dramas and tragedies. You can build a basic theater, but these amphitheaters were built for very different reasons, because you fill that with people. You get them excited, you get them sad, you make them sing and dance and clap their hands. That creates very powerful noise in that perfect acoustic environment that bounces against the wall, that vibrates, and those vibrations are sent up through the connecting pillars into the circuit board. And so it seems that that sound of humans in the amphitheaters were played a role as an activator or a key to start the circuit board to do whatever it's supposed to do. Here's another example of the amphitheater there, connected by a row of pillars that connected to the circuit board, which is obviously completely destroyed in this case. Here's another one. There's a circuit board on top of the mountain and an amphitheater just on the edge of the mountain that connects to that circuit board on top. It's a repetitive theme that we see all over. Here's a circuit board in Algeria, North Africa. And here the circuit board, the amphitheater is actually right in the heart of the circuit board. And it repeats and repeats. So secret of sound activation continues in medieval times, and it continues in modern times. Just because these ancient temples are destroyed and they no longer work doesn't mean that our sound is not being harvested and used. The temples have just become churches, and the obelisks have just become steeples. And who came up? Just think about this. Who came up with the architecture of churches and mosques? These giant ambient chambers in mosques and synagogues, it's a round building generally and with a dome on top. And then in churches, it's a square building or rectangular building with a steeple. They all have steeples and towers that go up. And at the top of the tower, you have a cone-shaped tool that faces the sky. Cone-shaped tools, what they do is they speed up the sound until the sound reaches the tip of that cone-shaped tool, at which it exits and turns into hypersound, or becomes a Caesar beam, if you want to call it that. So we're going to talk about that. But so who came up with the architectural design of these churches and religious places? Clearly, that was a very consciously designed and created structure so that it could get people in there and harvest their sound energy and shoot that energy up into the sky. For what purpose? I think you'll be surprised. There's some very overwhelming evidence of what that purpose is. But we create the sound. We go into these churches and we create the sound. And when you start looking at churches now, you'll start seeing very different places, not places of worship and spiritual places, but rather places of entrapment where our energy and our sound is being harvested from us. And obviously, this one is the mother of them all, the Vatican. This giant dome captures all the energy in there. So whether they are stone circles, pyramids, obelisks, domes, or cathedrals, they all harvest our sound and they use human sound for some purpose. Also note that these cathedrals and churches and places of antiquity are all placed along some very important lines. They're not just randomly scattered. The mystery of medieval cathedrals. I mean, modern day architects still argue, have no idea about how these cathedrals are built, but they truly are spectacular examples of capacity of human engineering, again, in modern times, 1,000 years ago, when these cathedrals started to be built. And it's just spectacular what goes on. And inside, all it is, it's a giant acoustic chamber filled with vibrating pillars that go from the bottom to the top of the acoustic chamber, which is covered by a dome. And on top of the dome, outside, we have spires, these spires and these little towers. And not just one in this case, we have dozens of them that capture the sound and shoot it up into the sky. And not only that, not only are they using the sound, but they seem to be using and amplifying the light that comes into these cathedrals and the churches. Let me remind you what light looks like. This is Robert Brumann's very impressive work with light and cymatic patterns in water with light and sound. And this is what light looks like in water. And what sound looks like in water. And what light looks like in water in vibrations. So when you look at these, what comes to mind very, very quickly are the spectacular shaped windows in the cathedrals and the churches around the world. So what's very obvious is that these windows were structured to convert the light that goes in there so that the shape of the light amplifies the acoustic effect inside the cathedral. Remember that the light has a frequency. So when they built a window with that specific shape, it converts the shape of the light as it goes through the window, and that frequency of that light is then amplified in the acoustic chamber of the cathedral. This is spectacular technology. And not only that, it also seems to be using magnetron technology. Many of these windows in these cathedrals are magnetron-shaped windows. So now they seem to be really converting the light going into magnetron frequencies, and those magnetron frequencies are then amplified in the ambient chamber of the cathedral or the church or the mosque or whatever religious building you're in. This is just spectacular knowledge of advanced knowledge of the basic laws of nature and how simply it can be used around us. Just more examples of the magnetron-shaped windows that transfer magnetron energy into the churches and mosques and whatever building it is. It is just mind-blowing. It's right there for us to see, but we've just been too blind to realize what's going on. We are those babies waking up from our infantile state of being humans, realizing that there's a much bigger game being played here. This is a fantastic photograph taken by a woman called Annie in Sweden, showing the toroidal shape of the sound, the torus field that's created by the sound that emanates from a tower, a church tower. I mean, sometimes a picture tells 1,000 words, and this is just one of those fantastic examples that you just cannot believe how obvious things are. So as the sound comes out of the tower, it creates a Caesar beam. And what do Caesar beams do? Caesar beams create toroidal fields. That's what happens. Toroidal fields are the fundamental source of everything. So there'll always be a toroidal field around any source of sound. And there's the perfect example for us, captured on a photograph. You look at cities that generate energy. Non-stop. The buildings are just like giant towers and obelisks going up into the sky, vibrating with all the noise. Often, many of the buildings in the cities have pyramids on top of them, energizing and focusing. Many of them have domes. Many of them have spires and needles, like the Empire State Building. It's just like a giant injection going up into the sky, vibrating the sound and pushing it up into the sky. Why? We'll discover very soon. The city grids are giant circuit boards, just vibrating and generating huge energy, pushing it up into the sky. And the cities are connected to each other, just like the stone circles are connected to each other, with these channels called highways that are filled with cars and that continue making a noise. We never stop making a noise. So now the cities are connected with channels that keep making noises. We never stop making a noise. We're constantly generating energy that is somehow being used, and we are oblivious to that. Think about the sports stadiums and all the noise we make in those places that we congregate in. It is quite spectacular. And this is why when Morpheus held up the battery in the movie The Matrix and said, people are the source of energy that holds up the matrix. This is a spectacular revelation of what's really going on. So is there a matrix? Is there some sort of an energy field up in the sky that is holding us or locking us in, preventing us from actually reaching out and connecting with other beings, connecting with other intelligence, or maybe even leaving our domain of Earth and actually traveling through space? Is it possible that we're actually locked in here? like the movie The Dome, the TV show The Dome, and the book The Dome, where people are trapped under a dome. Nothing can penetrate the dome. Nothing can come through. Not even atomic bombs could penetrate the dome. Well, you'll be surprised how close to that reality we actually find ourselves on this planet, in this world of ours. Some of the great mysterious structures of the past are also depicted in the Towers of Bologna. Now, this is a mind-blowing event, again, a major city in Italy that until quite recently had more than 200 towers, or around 200 towers, up to 60 meters tall, surrounded by a whole city wall. The reasons and the origins for these original towers remains as mysterious as anything else we find in ancient civilizations. And yet it's something that happened quite recently. What I find fascinating is that this drawing and image of the city of Bologna in the 1700s shows this weird dome. Look at that dome. Why would the artist put a dome over the city of Bologna with all its towers? You know, it looks like some sort of a guitar amp with its valves sticking out, for those of you who know what guitar amplifiers look like. It's crazy what's going on here. Once again, are we dealing with some sort of a gigantic machine that was constructed and then those towers were reoccupied and reused for other things and other purposes in more recent times? It certainly seems to be pointing in that direction. So here's a more recent photograph in the late 1800s of the city of Bologna. At that stage, most of those towers had already gone, and today only 2 of them remain. What we do know is that there seems to be an energetic earth grid. Not seems to be, there is a magnetic energetic earth grid that turns the world into a giant torus. The earth is a torus, right? And these magnetic fields are often confused and called ley lines. Actually, what we're looking at are these magnetic fields that cover the whole world. And the energies that connect the magnetic fields are referred to as ley lines. So it's very obvious that these ancient sites that we find are all built on these very important, powerful, energetic nodal points. So these ancient cultures didn't just build them randomly. They knew where to put them. And that's why we find these sites at specific places, at specific points. And it's obviously an integrated pattern that gets smaller and bigger as you discover the fractals of these magnetic fields. And what's interesting is that the Sumerian texts talk about these grids on Earth where the cities were built, but the Sumerian texts also referred to some sort of an energetic field in the sky, and the rules of the sky by which the rules by which the cities of the world were constructed, according to the rules of heaven and earth. This is a Sumerian clay tablet, MS 5103, that says the following: in distant days, in those days after destinies had been decreed, after An and Enlil had set up the regulations for heaven and earth, Enki, the exalted knowing God, by the rules for heaven and earth, the fixed rules, he set up cities. Pay attention, the rules for heaven and earth, the fixed rules, he set up cities. So they say there's some sort of rules in the sky, and according to those rules or energy grid or whatever you want to call it, this is where I'm going with it, they put the cities on earth, in the world. And it's fascinating that many years ago now, David Wilcock shared with us the images and the decoding of these logos of Air Force and Space Command, and how they show these white rings that seem to be going around the world and are up in the sky, and refer to these white bands as the rules, some sort of impenetrable force up in the sky. They don't know where it comes from, but it's always been there and nothing can penetrate it. So we have ancient civilizations. The Sumerian texts talk about this energy force in the sky, and they call it the rules, the fixed rules. And here we have local and recent logos of Space Force and Air Force that talk about the rules. This is not a coincidence, obviously. And in more recent times, a friend of mine discovered that there's actually a very powerful energy grid up in the sky, and some sort of a matrix grid around the world. He called me up and he said, look, I found this, and this is a guy that knows about sound and frequency and resonance. He creates machines that work with us at a very, very high level. And he told me he thinks he's going crazy. He found this very powerful energy grid in the sky that cannot be penetrated. He cannot penetrate it. It's like a binary code in the sky that holds us in. And that's just mind-blowing. He told me he sent out certain frequencies up into the sky, and he cannot penetrate it with any of the frequencies that he sends up. And I find this fascinating because he also shows a photograph of this. He looked at the Google sky and he found in certain areas that you can actually see this weird object up very, very high in the sky that forms a part of some sort of a giant grid that is up there. Now, pay attention to the structure of this object that is clearly there. This is an actual screenshot of Google sky, something that's up there. And then we look at the movie. Remember, Hollywood hides it in plain sight in many of the movies. They tell us what's going on. They tell us the narrative so that we don't get surprised when it happens. We're already programmed. That's why it's called programming, right? We're aware of that. In the movie Geostorm, this is part of the machine, this net in the sky that covers the whole world, that controls the weather, controls communications, controls us, and controls everything on Earth below. And just compare this and what this looks like to this image from Google Sky. Isn't it fascinating to see that there's actually something very similar that is truly up there as opposed to in a Hollywood movie? And so it goes. So let's continue. Let's talk about sound as a tool and technology. And this is where it gets really fascinating. Sound and resonance. Remember, since sound is the source of everything, we can do everything with sound. I'm just going to go through this very quickly because I've gone through this ad nauseum in many of my lectures and presentations. So I'm not going to bore you with this. You can watch my other presentations about this. And just to remind us that sound can do anything and is a source of everything. And this is why if we choose to do anything, we can use sound to do that with. Right? And these are just some examples. Most importantly, sound creates light. God said, let there be light, right? Sound levitates, sound boils water, sound creates DNA, sound heals and destroys pathogens, sound makes things invisible, sound energizes water and the air we breathe. Sound is a precursor to electromagnetism. Sound creates Caesar beams, which are infinitely more powerful than laser beams. Sound moves beyond the speed of light. And this is one of the best kept secrets of science and physics and the educational establishment, not to let that cat out of the bag. Because once people realize that sound can move and travels beyond the speed of light, everything changes. And we start to think about our reality very differently. Sound creates light. Just going to go through this very quickly. You can do this experiment at home. Royal Raymond Rife cured disease, and we continue curing diseases with sound, resonance, and frequencies. George Lakhovsky with his multiple wave oscillator, which is lesser known, that Royal Raymond Rife cured all kinds of diseases, including cancer, with this multiple wave oscillator. Anthony Holland in 2011 showed how, from Skidmore College, he's a music professor at Skidmore College, discovered how his sound frequencies can kill cancer, all kinds of cancer cells. And he tells us that the frequencies that kill cancer cells are between 100,000 and 300,000 hertz. So that's for all those researchers out there. Go and knock yourselves out and share that with the world. The Ankh was clearly used as a source of healing and a healing tool. All over the ancient Egypt, they leave images for us showing us how they used the Ankh as a tool of healing. The medicine wheel in Native American symbols shows us that the medicine men understood sound because the cross in a circle is one of the fundamental shapes of cymatics, and cymatic patterns forms crosses in a circle. And that tells us that they knew that sound was a healer. The Ark of the Covenant was not only a communication device, covered in gold, because remember, Moses was told to sit in the mercy seat, and God would speak to him when he sat in the mercy seat and tell him what to tell the Israelites. So it was clearly a communication device. And it was also a powerful weapon. It defeated large armies. It brought down the walls of Jericho. It was pretty much like a giant acoustic, or an acoustic chamber, a resonant chamber that they carried around. It was creating frequencies. It could send and receive frequencies. And this is what the Ark of the Covenant was, a very powerful device. Sound levitates. This has been shown over and over again. John Keeley levitated stuff in his lab in Philadelphia, giant balls, metal balls, and he'd levitate with all kinds of trumpets in his laboratory. And that's his famous Dynasphere that he did all kinds of things with. Peter Davey in New Zealand boiled water with sound. Instant boiling of water with specific sound frequencies. Remember, everything has a prime resonance frequency, and boiling water would have a prime resonance frequency, a frequency at which water boils. So if you expose it to that frequency, it will boil instantly. Careful, it's a dangerous weapon. Our bodies are made up of 80 or 90% water. So don't make that device and then go boil your body up and blow it up. It becomes a very, very powerful weapon of mass destruction. Sound acts as a cloak of invisibility. Sound could put out fires. These guys in the USA already many years ago showed how their little tube that resonates very low frequencies puts out fires, very hot fires in a pan within seconds, 5 seconds, puts out this hot fire in a pan just by exposing it to these low resonating sound frequencies. Sound creates hurricanes, obviously. Now that you know that sound is a torus field, every time you get a hurricane or a storm and the spiraling effect of a storm or tornadoes, you realize that you're looking at a toroidal field. You're looking at the manifestation or the creation of a giant torus right in front of us, a visible torus in the sky. Here's a patent for a hurricane and a tornado control device to make hurricanes with sound. How to create hurricanes with sound. Sound creates supercluster galaxies. Remember that supercluster galaxies, the larger the galaxy, the lower the frequency. And this is why when they tell us that the sound waves are 57 octaves lower than middle C, it is consistent with our understanding and our knowledge of how sound patterns and the cymatic shapes are created. The higher the frequency, the more complex and the smaller the pattern. The lower the frequency, the larger the pattern. And therefore, a supercluster galaxy will have a very, very low frequency. In this case, it resonates 57 octaves lower than middle C, right? You see the chronology that's happening there. These are the dots that we connect and started to make sense how simple the laws of nature are and how simply we can interact with it and use it and benefit from it in every possible way. This is just an image that NASA shares with us of that supercluster galaxy. And what I don't show in this lecture, but what you can see for yourself, especially the one on the left, you can see cymatic patterns here. It's very clear. These are cymatic patterns we're looking at. And especially the one on the left looks like lycopodium powder on a metal plate. It's spectacular. It looks identical to that. In a little lab in your room, you can take lycopodium powder, put sound frequency through it, and it'll look just like that you see on the left, just on a tiny scale compared to a supercluster galaxy. Sound energizes the air we breathe. And actually the sound of the air as it goes through all the pipes into your lungs, it speeds up, and it's the sound of that air that actually energizes the oxygen that eventually reaches your alveoli. And it's that vibrating, energized oxygen from the sound that we then use. The oxygen goes into our blood and we strip it of its energy. The energy goes into our bodies. And once the energy has been removed, we breathe the oxygen out as carbon dioxide, and it goes through the process over and over again. We don't use up the oxygen. It gets recycled all the time and re-energized and recycled. Dr. Luc Montagnier, Nobel Prize winner in 2011, found spontaneous generation of DNA by exposing a tube of water and passing light through it and sound frequency through it, should I say. And that sound frequency picks up the frequency of the DNA and creates DNA in a separate glass of water or a tube of water. So we can create DNA from sound frequency. There are many other experiments that I go into and information about this in my other lectures and presentations. So please sign up to my channel on michaeltelinger.com to get hundreds of hours of those lectures for yourself. Sonoluminescence is known as star in a jar. When you take sound frequency and you expose a body of water like this ball of water, you expose it to certain frequencies. After a few minutes, this bubble appears filled with light. Inside, in the center of a body of water, expose it to sound. After a while, a bubble filled with light appears. What does that remind you of? The Spirit of God moved over the waters, and God said, "Let there be light." Maybe now you understand why I'm thinking that maybe all of space, unbeknown to us, is actually water, and water is a primordial consciousness that brings forth everything. So sound is the ultimate source of free energy. Anyone that's looking at discovering free energy, you've got to look at sound and how sound works and how we can use sound to generate that 0 point at the center of the torus. And that's exactly what Nikola Tesla discovered, as I suggested earlier. We're going to look at ancient tools and artifacts in more detail, and very clearly the torus stones that I've been collecting, thousands and thousands of torus stones that lie scattered around Southern Africa. They're also found all over the world, but they seem to be concentrated here in Southern Africa. So many years ago, we started measuring very powerful energy fields coming out of these torus stones. And that already made me think that we're not dealing with weights for digging sticks, but actually energy generating devices or tools that were used by the ancients, the Anunnaki, and those that were constructing the stone circles here. When you combine a torus stone or the donut-shaped stone, this energy-generating device, with a cone-shaped tool, now you have a source to put the energy or the sound frequency that comes out of the donut-shaped stone, and you put it into the cone-shaped tool that speeds up and creates a Caesar beam as the sound and the frequency exits the tip of the cone-shaped tool. So we have not only an energy-generating device, but also a focusing device that can generate the energy, the sound frequencies, and then create Caesar beam technology out of that. This is a very powerful and important combination through simply understanding the laws of nature around us and the role of sound, resonance, and frequency in everything. So this is why it was very important when I started to collect in 2007. I already started to collect the cone-shaped tools that are scattered across the mountains here in Southern Africa, scattered among the ancient ruins. And little did I know that I stumbled upon one of the completely ignored and most important discoveries in all of ancient worlds and ancient civilizations, the cone-shaped tools, because you find them everywhere. You find cone-shaped tools in England, in Australia, among the Mayas. You see images and drawings and statues of shamans holding cone-shaped tools. Sumerian statue, a healer, somebody healing somebody with cone-shaped tools here. We have gold cone-shaped hats that were used for ceremonial and inaugurations. Wizards wear cone-shaped hats, and wizards' wands are cone-shaped. Should be no surprise. Edley Skalnin, that built Coral Castle, was seen levitating the giant stones that weighed many tons with ice cream cones. Whoever saw him, the boys that saw him, didn't know that these were cone-shaped tools. They simply looked like ice cream cones to them. But there's a very important connection there to be made. These famous depictions of these bird-shaped beings that show us them holding these fine cones, cone-shaped tools. But pay attention to what's on his wrist. On his wrist is a magnetron-shaped watch, that flower-shaped watch. By now, we know that anytime you see a flower shape like that, it refers to magnetron technology. Magnetron technology, energy generating device. It's going into a cone. We start to realize what's going on here. Putting energy into a cone-shaped tool, it creates Caesar beams and turns into a technological device. But pay attention that on his arm, there is also a cone that points to the top edge of that magnetron watch. So this image is deeply encoded with advanced knowledge and technology. The cone-shaped tools in Egypt. Here we have cone-shaped tools on display, completely ignored by historians, archaeologists, and whoever studies this stuff. But not only do we have cone-shaped tools, they're lying right next to little magnetron devices. Look at those tiny little magnetron devices with these cone-shaped tools. So clearly, this is being completely missed and ignored. And they're showing us that they were using this advanced technology in ancient times and in Egypt as well. These Sumerian cones that are filled with cuneiform text on them. And the texts tell us that these cone-shaped tools were used in the construction of the temples of Sumer. Now, I can imagine that they weren't used as wedges to stop the temples from wobbling, right? That these were used for the construction of the temples in Sumer. Very advanced technology, cone-shaped tools. And this is where we also see in nature around us how cone-shaped structures and tools in anatomy, in biology, in us, in insects around us play a very important role. Dragonflies, for example, those things in their wings those are not veins or arteries filled with blood. Those are hollow tubes that are filled with air, and well, they're hollow tubes. They're probably filled with some sort of substance, but they're hollow tubes. And when the dragonfly vibrates its wings, and they do flap their wings slightly. I've often been said that they don't flap their wings. They do actually flap them, but it's the flapping that creates the vibration. And it's very, very, very fast vibrating like this. So those vibrations send resonance through the tubes, these hollow tubes in the wings. And guess what's in the wings? The bottom of the wings are filled with these tiny little cones, these spikes. So as the frequencies go into the hollow tubes, the sound goes into these cones, these spikes. As it exits, it creates these toroidal fields. And this is why dragonflies can move around so incredibly effortlessly, because they're moving around in these gravity-free torus or torsion field vortexes. So this is a spectacular discovery. And this is why many bugs whose wings are just not big enough to be able to fly are able to fly, which has been a big mystery among people that study insects and their ability to fly. Viktor Grebennikov is known for developing his flying little platform out of bugs' wings. So he claims that he created this flying platform. There he is on his little levitation platform by sticking bugs' wings to the bottom. Now that we understand this toroidal and the cone-shaped technology and the toroidal fields that emanates, it's very simple to explain that. So keep in mind, it looks like he's holding like a handle, like a motorbike handle. Now, I imagine a motorbike handle that just like changes the frequency. So you just rev it up until you hit the sweet spot, at which point that frequency goes into the cones of the bug's wings that are at the bottom. It goes out and it creates a toroidal field around you. At that point, you are completely devoid of gravity and you can move around just like the dragonflies move around so effortlessly. And Viktor Grebennikov claims that he flew around Russia on his flying device at faster than the speed of sound and without any effects and without any wind or anything. So clearly he was inside a toroidal field, electromagnetic field, completely free from any wind or that kind of resistance. All we need to know is the details. And once we understand this, we can pretty much explain everything. Let's move on to the bug's wing structures. And this is really even more important when you start realizing the structure in fine detail like this, and you start seeing some of the other inventions. Look at the structure on the left there, the little cones on the little section of the plate, because that's when we realize how powerful that is. So we're dealing with vortex energy, excuse me. Remember, when you talk about vortex energy, toroidal energy, or torsion fields, it's all the same thing. All the same thing. It's not clever people talking about different things. So these are all known for creating anti-gravity or levitation effects. So it's really the answers to all questions are in toroidal fields. The secrets of the universe, according to Nikola Tesla, are encoded in the numbers 369. Well, clearly he was telling us that 369 is the study of toroidal fields because, or he was working with toroidal fields, and the secret of the universe lies in toroidal fields, because vortex maths and the study of toroidal maths revolves all around 369. And here you go, you can see you've got the 9 at the top, 3 and 6. So the entire thing of toroidal field maths or vortex maths revolves around the numbers 369. So Tesla was telling us that the secrets of the universe are encoded in toroidal fields and toroidal structures, or black holes, if you want to call them that. And even the symbols of secret societies could very well be encoded in their logos, like this one here. The Freemason logo is very, very close to the numbers as they are outlined on in the study of vortex maths. So I believe that the reason why the Freemasons could build these amazing structures and many of the secrets that they held at the highest levels is this knowledge, the secrets of the universe and the manifestation of matter, the manipulation of sound and light and all these things that we've just touched upon here. The Torus stones emit very powerful energies and sound frequencies. I've mentioned that already. I was told by a German scientist that studies toroidal fields that some of these Torus stones that he measured emit up to 3,400 decibels of sound. That's a very powerful sound. 3,400 decibels is unimaginable, but very, very high frequencies, we can't hear them. And it affects our body. And we know it affects our body because I feel the effects, and people that come into my museum and work with the Torus stones, many of them can't even hold a Torus stone because they say it affects them too much. So we're clearly dealing with powerful energy generating devices. It's been measured by some of my scientific friends in Germany that share this information with me, but we can also now see it. We can actually now see how these toruses emit energy. We've seen it by putting a stone into water, and we see the next morning, thousands of spiraling bubbles were moving around into a spine, spiraling into the center of the Torus stone. But even more obvious is, this is an actual experiment that shows how when you take a electro EMF meter and you bring it to the Torus stone, the one way the Torus stone gives off energy, and if you turn the stone around the other way, it sucks energy. It makes the needle go the other way. So the one way, it pushes the needle up until it actually maxes out. The meter cannot take the energy anymore, and it maxes out. And you turn the stone around, it pulls the needle in the opposite direction. What this tells me is a very important discovery, that the Torus stones are energy generating devices. They're not balanced toroidal fields. This is really important, and this is why they were used to generate energy with all kinds of other tools and technology, possibly with the cone-shaped tools. So let's move past this slide. And this is the one I was really looking forward to sharing with you. Here you can see thermal camera imaging, the same Torus stone photograph taken from the one side and photograph taken from the other side. And if you look carefully, there is a 20 degrees Celsius difference at the center of that stone. And this is just absolutely spectacular. So it shows us that the Torus stones suck energy the one way and they push energy out in the opposite direction. So they're not balanced toroidal fields, they're energy generating devices. Very important. And here you can see my friend Thomas in Germany, just by holding the Torus stone, within 30 seconds, look how his thyroid gland here, look how it heats up and becomes red just by holding that Torus stone. This is my meeting with Nassim Haramein in 2015, when I took this Torus stone to him, and the story has become quite well known, so I'm not going to repeat it, but that stone that we're holding there is the stone that crashed the TSA security system in Doha International Airport in Qatar. That stone is back in the museum, and we're doing all kinds of interesting experiments with it. We need to do a lot more, but the fact that that stone crashed the TSA security system basically gives us the scientific evidence that was shared with us by the captain of the aeroplane and Homeland Security at the Doha airport in Qatar, that told us that that is a powerful energy generating or powerful ancient technology. Now, one of the common referred to subject is this thing called 0 point, and anyone that's working in free energy and so forth is often referring as 0 point energy and 0 point technology and so forth. It's very important that already I think it was in 2008 that Nassim Haramein wrote his famous paper with his partner, and they wrote the paper that shows and proves that the density of the 0 point, that point right in the middle, the density of that 0 point of a torus, what he calls the vacuum, is infinite. It has infinite density. This is a very important recognition and a very important, one of the most important dots that we connect on this journey of discovery. So the 0 point at the center of a torus, of any black hole, of any torus, that density is infinite. And you'll start seeing how important that discovery and realization is in the internal, infinite, fractal nature of reality around us, and how simple things really are. So you can also see the way that the energy flows in there. It flows in there in a cone kind of vortex, right? Interesting things when you start looking at this. So the torus and the cone combination, just to remind you, very powerful combination to generate and focus energy. SESA technology was already released to us in 2009. This is nothing new, but it has certainly not made it into the mainstream. None of us are using SESA technology. That's kept for the military and the secret industrial military complex and the large corporations that are probably doing things with it that we don't know about. The cone tip of a SESA device is really, it's a cone, or the tip of a SESA device would be a cone, and this is why these cone-shaped tools play such an important role in their discovery, brings in a very important missing piece of the puzzle that starts to complete the picture of the advanced technology of ancient civilizations. Keep in mind that our eyes have cones. We have rods and cones in the retina of our eyes. Our irises around our lens, the irises of our eyes are like little toruses with a lens in the middle. So the light and the sound comes from outside through the iris, which is a torus, through the lens, get focused to the back of our retina, which is like a satellite dish. And in the satellite dish called the retina, we have cones that face backwards. And from the cone goes the optic nerve that goes into our pineal glands. So you can start seeing how advanced the technology is inside our bodies. And it is the same technology that we find in nature, from the source of creation to how our bodies and anatomy works, to the bugs' wings and dragonflies and so forth. It is quite spectacular. So in essence, we should all be able to do this with our eyes. If we become fully activated and if our DNA works properly, we should be able to do all these things with our intention, focus our eyes to reverse the action, and our satellite dishes called the retinas actually send out the energy through the lens, focusing the energy into a beam. So, it's no surprise that an advanced DNA individual like a Superman, whose DNA is fully complete, can do things like that. And very soon, maybe we will too, as our DNA evolves. What's important to recognize this connection again, how we learn this from nature and how we apply it in mainstream science and physics and technology, is this example. This is Henrik Holter, who won the Saab Award in November 2017 for the most powerful antenna ever built. And this antenna could both send and receive information. And this antenna was thousands of times, possibly infinitely more powerful than any antenna before. And if you look at his antenna, all it is a bunch of cones on a metal plate. And if you cast your mind back to the structure of the bug's wings, what the wing actually looked like, it looks like a cross-section, or this looks like a cross-section of the bug's wings that allow them to fly. And that This technology is actually the same technology that Viktor Grabinikov used in his levitation platform, where he found the sweet spot with his motorbike handle to find the frequency to create the right frequencies to go out the tip of these cones that were in the bug's wings. There we have it. The bug's wings structure, as I was explaining, and you start to realize how we imitate nature and how we use biomimicry to build buildings and to create technology and so forth. This is quite spectacular. In Middle Tennessee State University in 2005 already, they moved sound beyond the speed of light. This is possibly one of the most important scientific discoveries in science and physics of all times, in recent times. And yet that was buried so quickly when a bunch of undergraduates and some high school kids moved sound beyond the speed of light. This was reported on and written about in 2007. It was an article in the American Institute of Physics. It's called Superluminal Propagation is Realized, and all about how they did this. And this makes us realize that sound moves beyond the speed of light, that light is not the final frontier, that things can move beyond the speed of light. And the moment we realize that, everything that we have been told about the restrictions moving beyond the speed of light fly out the window. So how can sound move faster than the speed of light? How fast does sound move? So let's just go through this realization again. I brought it up earlier. The 0 point at the center of any torus, that 0 point is infinitely dense. So we know that when you put light through a medium, the denser the medium, the slower the speed of light. That's why when you put light beam into water, it slows down and the light bends. When you put light into a prism, it bends even more and gives us all the colors. When you put light through even a denser medium, it stops. Light doesn't move through metal or wood. So if the medium is very dense, light doesn't move through it, but sound does. So the denser the medium, the slower the speed of light. Now, the converse or the opposite is true for sound. The denser the medium, the faster the speed of sound. So what happens, you know that sound travels faster in water because water is denser than air. So sound moves at a specific pace in air, and you put the same sound into water, it moves faster. I believe it's about 8 times faster in water. And the denser the medium, so if you put sound through a metal, it moves even faster because metal is much denser than water. So the question is, how fast does sound move through an infinitely dense medium? And the answer is infinitely fast. Well, what do we find at the center of a 0 point, at the center of every torus, at the center of every black hole? An infinitely dense point called the 0 point. Since sound is a torus field that emanates from that 0 point, that tells us that all the sound frequencies, all the resonance of creation is connected to that 0 point. And all the trillions of cells in your body, all the atoms, all the electrons that make up the sounds are all little toruses with 0 points at their center. So every sound you make, every word you speak, every move you make, every sound it creates, that sound automatically, instantly goes into the 0 point of that little torus field that it has created. And by entering that 0 point, that sound frequency or thought or word or message, anything you do, is instantaneously shared across all space and time with everything. So everything we think, every word we speak should be and is available to everyone across all space and time because it enters that infinite density of the 0 point, which sits at the center of every toroidal field. And that seems to be the absolute recognition of how we can use the laws of nature and how everything is structured around us, and how the ancients knew about this, how they used that technology, how we could possibly travel through space and through wormholes without having to fly in rocket ships, how we can actually move from here to there. This is how Max Planck's electron moves from one place to another because it is the sound that manifests that electron that suddenly appears in a different place. It's not the physical electron that actually moves. And this is how biolocation works and how we can explain biolocation. So this for me presents the unified theory of everything, or the TOE, the theory of everything, far more elegantly than any other science formula or Einstein formula or any formula I have seen in any university or any textbook. The toroidal field, this integrated fractal toroidal nature of reality, for me, is the unified theory of everything, since we now know of the infinite density of the 0 point, and that could also explain to us what it is that we look at when we look at the center of the universe. What is that singularity that we look at? That singularity is most likely the 0 point of the giant toroidal field that makes up our known universe, the perceived known universe that seems to be expanding and contracting, breathing like a torus field does. Toroidal fields do not stand still because it's made of sound and magnetism, and they keep moving and vibrating and breathing. And this is why when we observe the things in the universe, it seems like some are moving away or some are coming closer, and it seems to be doing this breathing exercise. And that singularity point that I brought up right at the beginning is most likely that 0 point of the torus that we call our universe. And the more questions we ask, the more mysterious are the things we find. And that really brings me to that question that I posed right at the beginning. What do we do with all this knowledge and information? It's Michael Telinger, and welcome to the Q&A section. Thanks for watching my intensive presentation. It's great to be here at Contact in the Desert. We've had a host of questions that came in over this period during the presentation. And obviously I can't answer all the questions. It's just impossible. So I've chosen about 13 questions that I think will probably take maybe the 30 minutes that I'm allocated here. I'm going to go through them as quickly as possible. All right, so thanks very much for tuning in, and let's go through these questions. So we're starting with Katie or Kate in Ohio. What were the stone circles used for? What was the energy used for? Thank you, Kate, very much. Very frequently asked question. At this stage, there are a number of theories what the energy may have been used for. Okay, for those that don't know, remember that stone circles generate a huge amount of energy. There are more than 10 million of these structures covering most of or large parts of Southern Africa. So the amount of energy that was created here is virtually unimaginable to us today. So we've got to be realistic about what such a huge engineering accomplishment would have been used for, an energy generating device. And for many years, I believe that the stone circles were used for the gold mining and possibly used for gold mining themselves, the stone circles themselves. In fact, that's probably another question that we should answer, but it wasn't asked here. So I'll deal with this on my channel with the Q&A questions on my video channel. I believe that the stone circles were probably used for aspects of the gold mining or the energy that was generated. But more and more, I'm leaning towards the fact that the stone circles, because of such a huge area that they cover and such a unimaginable engineering undertaking, it must have been much more important than just for mining gold. Although the gold was important to the Anunnaki, obviously, the stone circle, the size of it is just too big just for gold mining. And it is becoming more and more clear to me that the stone circles as a giant machine were most likely used for geoengineering, terraforming, and probably one of the key roles that it played was for creating a habitable climate and a habitable atmosphere, or a habitable climate, and changing the atmosphere, changing the climate so that it would be more habitable for the Anunnaki or whoever else was responsible for constructing these structures. And the reason I say that is because many of the stone circles are located in areas of highland areas where the grass is still short, and you can see the structures and the channels and the extended networks of these structures. And then they continue into the low veld, as it's known in South Africa, where the terrain and the atmosphere has changed completely. And the stone circles carry on into those areas. But now there are trees and grass and totally different vegetation than they must have been when the stone circles were built. So now the stone circles are covered by the completely different vegetation, not just grassland, so you can still see them, like further on the higher altitude areas, the highlands, or the high veld, as it's called in South Africa. And that suggests that there was a change in climate, a climate change. And that also suggests that the stone circles are incredibly old, that predate and they predate the formation of many of the rivers and the streams that come down the mountains, where we see they've washed away the walls and the terraces and the channels. So the rivers that formed after the stone circles, and that suggests that there was a climate change after the stone circles had been built, and the sheer size and scale of this engineering feat or project would suggest that it would have been for something more than just gold mining. Right, let's move on to next question. Sonia from Poland, Warsaw. Wow, all the way from Poland. Are there stone circles in Europe or other parts of the world? Do you know? And what are they for? Well, Sonia, thank you for that question, a frequently asked question. There are stone circles pretty much all over the world. South Africa is not exclusive to the stone circles. South Africa is the place where you can see the evidence of the stone circles and the remains of them the clearest. This is where we find the evidence of the largest clusters, the largest number of stone circles all pushed together, all together. That go back hundreds of thousands of years, but stone circles have been found pretty much all over the world, all over Europe, all over. I mean, Ireland is obviously full of stone circles. You get stone circles all over Israel and the whole Middle East and the Near East. Saudi Arabia is full of weird shapes and stone structures. Jordan and Syria and Iraq, full of stone circles. If you start studying the deserts there, it's not just stone circles, but circular stone structures that in many ways resemble the stone circles. And they're also often channels that come out of these weird structures. They are just the most mysterious and bizarre structures, especially in the Middle East, that boggle the mind. But stone circles can be found all over the world. I've even found evidence of stone circles and channels that once connected them on Easter Island. So yes, there are stone circles all over the world, but South Africa is the greatest example that remains of the vast expanse of it, the detail by which they were built and how they were connected to each other, and also the terraces that connect these stone circles together. Okay, let's carry on. Robert in Austin, USA. How did they build the stone circles? Do you know, or do you have any clues? We have some ideas. And first of all, if we start thinking about how they possibly built the stone circles, we got to imagine how they, what they knew about the cymatic shapes. We know that the stone circles represent the cymatic patterns, or the shape of the sound frequency that comes out of the earth. So they must have known somehow, figured out what the cymatic pattern looks like of the sound frequency that comes out of the earth at that specific place. So to keep this answer as short as possible to get to the other questions is, I have some very fascinating past life regressions of my own, of various other people, how the stone circles were built, and they all pretty much tell the same story. And remember that this is once the stories are the same, if the information that comes from past life regressions from people that don't know each other and didn't know about the building of the stone circles, if that information that comes back is very similar, then we can use the argument of statistical probability that this is probably very close to the truth, or how they did it. And one of the stories is that they had a way of activating an area inside a circular. Maybe they put some stones into the ground, some of the elongated stones or some other probes, and they activated that circular, that area inside that stone, that circle, with some frequencies that then showed up the cymatic shape of the sound coming out of the earth. And how they did that, instead of putting sand on a metal plate, so think of the earth there as inside the circular structure that they would have created, they put ash. They put ash in that area, then they activated it so that it would vibrate with the frequencies of the earth coming out of that area. And that would then show up the cymatic pattern or the cymatic shape of that sound frequency in that specific area. That's one of the ways that I believe, and some of the past life regressions have come back. And I must tell you that these past life regressions were from people that never heard of Michael Telinger, that have never heard of stone circles, never heard of the Anunnaki or the ancient ruins of Southern Africa. And yet when they were asked, do you have a past life in Southern Africa or South Africa, they immediately went to start talking about building stone circles in South Africa or Southern Africa with a lot more detail that I'm not going to go into right now. So something along those lines is probably how they knew where to pack the stones. And what's even more interesting, again, which I'm not going to go into, is how they packed the stones, where they got the stones from, how they packed it to get them into those shapes that now, we recognize as the ruined cymatic patterns and shapes of the original stone circle structures. Fascinating, unbelievable story that needs so much more research and ongoing exploration and research. So please go online and join my channel, become a patron of the Stone Circle Museum so we can get more funding and do more research. All right, just a reminder. Johnny from Birmingham, UK. Okay, UK. How did they use the cone-shaped tools? Great question, Johnny. I'm going to try and be as quick as possible. Remember that cone-shaped tools are really tools that focus the sound. It's all about sound. Since the stone circles are all about the sound energy generating magnetic fields, and the moving magnetic fields create electromagnetic fields. We know that the Anunnaki and the builders of the stone circles understood sound as a tool, understood how sound can be used to manipulate pretty much everything. Because remember, if sound is a primordial source of creation and the source of everything, that means once we know how to manipulate sound and use sound, we can use sound to the same extent. We can drill holes with sound the same way that John Keely did in Philadelphia in the 1880s already. And we can use sound to levitate. Sound being used as a tool of levitation is very well documented, and I speak about it in the presentation itself. Just touching on that surface, obviously. But the key thing here, I think, the cone-shaped tools is, and the discovery that I made here about the cone-shaped tools that then led to realizing that cone-shaped tools have been one of the most ignored, or not one, the most ignored tools and artifacts in all of human history and archaeology, and suddenly were thrust into the spotlight of ancient advanced technology. Because once you know how to focus the sound frequencies and resonance into the cone-shaped tool, and how that cone then speeds up the sound, and it sound obviously spirals and speeds up as it spirals towards the tip. It goes faster and faster and faster. And by the time that sound frequency and the resonance leaves the tip of the cone, it moves incredibly fast. In fact, it would enter into hyper sound and alternative or very, very advanced sound as a tool. And this is how Sazer beams are most likely created, by the secret military research labs and all those people that have released Sazer or are working with Sazer technology. So my understanding of this is that they use the cone-shaped tools to focus a frequency into that. By the time that sound or that resonance or that frequency leaves the cone, it is moving pretty much at infinite speeds, right? If you watch the presentation, you'll understand that sound moves infinitely fast, not necessarily in this medium, in air, not sound moving through air. But once sound is converted into what we refer to as hypersound, it goes into the 0 point of the toroidal fields in the space around us. And in that medium, sound moves infinitely fast and becomes an infinitely powerful tool. So those Caesar beams that come out of the tip of the cone-shaped tool, if once you know how to manipulate that and use it, obviously then create very powerful magnetic fields around those cones. Now, since we're dealing with high levels of consciousness, knowledge, and understanding how to use this technology, I suspect that even every thought you have is a frequency, is a resonance. So you can channel that thought through your arm, through your hand, into the cone. You don't need another machine for that. And I think this is why we see a lot of the statues and images and paintings and etc. of these beings holding the cones in their hands. Many of them, they hold two cones, very similar to what Ed Leeds-Kalnin was seen doing, holding two cones and levitating those giant coral rock blocks, weighing many tons, several tons, up to many tons, up to 30 tons, I believe. The heaviest one is at Coral Castle in southern Florida. Ed Leeds-Kalnin was seen levitating those coral rocks with ice cream cones or two cones in his hands. So that suggests the following, and this is what I've sort of figured out, and I've discussed this with several, very knowledgeable scientists, physicists that understand that side of physics and laser and Caesar technology. And what I suspect is that once you know how to manipulate that Caesar beam, you can either use it as a cutting tool, a laser beam, to drill holes, to cut, or to levitate. And the way it would be used to levitate, again, it's the thought, it's a frequency of your thought that then turns that Caesar beam into the machine that it should be. I know it sounds a bit weird, but ultimately, it's all about consciousness and utilizing sound, the primordial source of manifestation that comes from consciousness, from the consciousness field, to use that as a tool to do whatever we need to do. So if you have one cone in your hand and you create a Caesar beam that comes out of that, and that Caesar beam creates a very powerful magnetic field around it, incredibly powerful magnetic field. That becomes great. You can then aim it at something, and then that body or that object would be surrounded and covered in the magnetic field of that Caesar beam. But if you have two next to each other, then you have two magnetic fields, and those two magnetic fields then work together that trap that object, whatever it is you want. You can trap it, and that object would then be in a gravity-free area or gravity-free zone, so it weighs nothing. So you can literally move it around and put it anywhere you want, and that would go for any size object. You can take a cone-shaped tool, create a Caesar beam out of it to cut something down. So you can cut down a mountaintop, or you can cut down a giant tree that's several miles high. You can chop the tree down or chop down the top of a mountain because you want to get the gold out of it, or you want to get into the mountain. Who knows what these guys are doing? So once you've chopped down that mountain with your very powerful, infinitely powerful Caesar beam, you can then take two of them, point it at the mountain, trap that piece of mountain or giant rock or whatever, and in the gravity-free area between the two magnetic fields, powerful magnetic fields, and move it anywhere you want. So something along those lines. I think that's how this cone-shaped technology was used. We're really scratching the surface, but what we do know, it is incredibly powerful technology. It is used at the highest levels of military and the war machine technology that they're creating. So keep that in mind. Right, let me carry on to the next question. Solly from Perth, Australia. Wow, okay, Solly. Is there any evidence of similar activity in Australia, like stone circles or ancient gold mining and so forth? Solly, this is a very timeous question, very important question. Earlier, I responded to Sonia when she said, are there any other stone circles in Europe or other parts of the world? Yes, there are. And Australia is no exception. First of all, we all know about gold in Australia. There are many gold mines in Australia. There was a gold rush in Australia in the 1800s, more or less at the same time as there was the gold rush in South Africa and in California. So this is no coincidence. And I must tell you that brand new information and discovery has just hit me literally a few weeks ago when someone in Australia sent me aerial photographs that they flew over and also then explored on Google Earth, somewhere in Western Australia, in the sort of desert areas of Western Australia, where there are countless stone circle structures very, very similar to many of the stone circles in South Africa. And that blew my mind. I have never seen that before. I've looked on Google Earth. I've explored Australia extensively. I've found some extremely bizarre and mysterious things. I've flown over Australia, Southern Australia as well, out into the desert, Wilmina Pound, and those very mysterious, sacred, ancient, sacred grounds in Australia. I've seen many of the ancient rock art out there in very special places that were shown to me by some of the Australian elders. And I can tell you that, first of all, the similarity of the rock art out there in Australia that I was shown is very, very similar to the rock art here in South Africa. Also, keep in mind that we've got those incredible petroglyphs, the hieroglyphs, the Egyptian hieroglyphs out just not far from Sydney. I forget what that area is called. I've been there twice. It is absolutely mind-boggling. So we know that the Egyptians were there, or the people that were from the Egyptian area that used the same form of writing were in Australia, that left the messages for us there. And Egypt was obviously a gold mining civilization. So the gold connection goes all over the world, and Australia is no exception. But what blew my mind is the aerial photographs, and you can see them on Google, are these stone circles that are very, very similar to many of the stone circles in South Africa. And I also found faint traces of what seemed to be the channels that connected the stone circles, that will still connect them together. They seem to be very, very badly eroded, but if you look carefully and you know what to look for, you look for the fingerprints of these, you see that there are definitely indications that these structures were also connected to each other in Australia, just like the stone circles in South Africa. But this is brand new information, and I have just recently been shown this, so this requires a lot more discovery and research. So, Solly, let's go to Faye in Dublin. Faye in Dublin, Ireland. Ireland is full of stone circles. Would they have a similar purpose, or are they connected in any way? Fantastic question, Faye. Obviously, first of all, thank you very much for this, all the way from Ireland. Ireland is one of the most mysterious countries in the world, and the history of Ireland is probably as badly researched and catalogued and written about as the ancient history of South Africa. One would expect that Ireland would be one of the most well-researched and explored places because of the large number of stone circles, those mysterious towers that you find all over Ireland, which are just ridiculous, that in many ways resemble the towers of Bologna. And all of this suggests that there was a very advanced ancient civilization there that used similar kind of technology to the technology we found associated with the stone circles of South Africa. So obviously, many of the Irish stone circles also don't have doors and entrances, and I have not explored them to the extent that I should, but definitely my gut feel is, just like all the stone circles around the world, they would have been energy generating devices like all the other ancient structures. We find energy generating devices, especially if you've got concentric circles. And a lot more needs to be done and researched and explored. And Ireland is a place to go and do that with all its other great, unbelievable, mysterious ancient ruins that are very, very badly explained and misunderstood, as far as I'm concerned, by the way. Let's carry on to France in North Dakota, France with a Z. What were the terraces for? Growing food or other activity? Have we found any ancient plants or some food grown in the terraces? Plant or food grown in the terraces? So very good question. I must tell you that right in the beginning, when I first started to explore the stone circles and going through the terraces and walking among the stone circles in early 2008, it may even have been in late 2007, one of the first mysterious plants that we discovered and photographed unexpectedly, I'm not going to go into the details because I still have another 5 or 6 questions to get to, was this plant that looks just like a miniature grape, grapevine with the leaves, exactly the same structure of the leaves of grapevines, and the little grapes, the little grape, how they grow on the grapevine. And that blew my mind. I sent that through to a friend of mine at Pretoria University, who shared that with a friend of his who's a PhD botanist in South Africa, a woman who confirmed, I now can't remember the Latin name for the plant and all that, and they were just absolutely flabbergasted by this discovery. They told me that according to just studying the photographs, they have not looked at the actual or analyzed the plant itself, but by studying the photographs, they concluded that is what they refer to as the primordial plant or specimen from which all grapes come. Now, we know from the Sumerian texts that the Anunnaki planted grapes and they made wine. So is it possible that we discovered in the terraces surrounding the stone circles evidence that has survived for hundreds of thousands of years of the earliest plants and grapes that were used by the Anunnaki to grow, obviously in very large numbers, and that they would make their wine from? I think it's a very strong possibility. So a lot more research needs to go into that. Obviously, I don't have the funding to do that. So again, sign up to my channel, become a patron of the Stone Circle Museum, help me do more of this research so we can share this with the world. Right, next question. Lily from London, UK. I guess so. Why were the Anunnaki obsessed with gold? And what did they need it for, and why? And how did they use it? Okay, this is obviously one of the most frequently asked questions. Why were the Anunnaki obsessed with gold? It seems from not just my research, but many other researchers that have looked into Anunnaki, the Sumerian text, the translations, is that they were obsessed not with a yellow solid form of gold that we have, like gold bars and gold jewelry and gold coins. They weren't interested in it because they didn't, obviously, gold was not a currency to them. Gold became a currency through the royal bloodlines and the banks that they started, and they started to use silver as a currency, and gold was actually never minted as coins because gold always belonged to the gods. So gold was very, very precious, but there was the solid yellow gold as we know it. The Anunnaki were interested in the monoatomic form of the gold, or the white powder of gold as it's often referred to. So that's a huge question and an answer that we can probably spend a week on to discuss that, debate that. But what is very clear is that once you have the solid gold, that would then create an insane amount of white powder or monoatomic gold, because the density of solid gold is so dense that when you start turning that into monoatomic gold, which is very, very light and much less dense and has unbelievable properties, like it's got healing properties, it fixes our DNA, it's got longevity effect on us that allows us to live for much longer. It seems that the Anunnaki somehow needed the gold to survive in this climate and in this environment. So if they were using Earth as a refuge to come and stay because something was wrong with their planet or their dimension or whatever the reason was, and they needed to stay on Earth for them to survive and to live eternally as they would in their own area, because remember, if your DNA is fully functional, you don't die, you live forever. Again, that's a whole nother subject. So the Anunnaki were used to living forever. And that's what it seems like, at least. So for them to be able to live forever on Earth, and if they were going to make Earth their new home, they needed to find a way to survive forever. And that's where they found the gold, and the monoatomic form of the gold would give them that longevity. I, however, suspect that it did not give them eternal life or eternal longevity of life. And this is possibly one of the reasons they may have left Earth eventually when they realized that it's not going to solve their problem. They're going to eventually die, as many of them did. Some much more information about that. Right. So the white powder of gold, monoatomic gold, watch my videos, sign up to my channel with a lot more information on the monoatomic gold as well. Then we get to Eve from Florida, USA. What was Adam's calendar all about? Do you believe that humanity was actually cloned there, as Credo Mutwa says or suggests? Yes, Eve, thank you very much. Adam's calendar is a giant machine. Clearly, it's a machine. It was originally probably one of the most powerful teleportation devices that was constructed by these advanced beings on Earth. One of the most powerful ones. Small, simple, compact, incredibly powerful. I believe it is probably used to beam up the gold wherever they wanted the gold, teleport it wherever they needed it, whether it was on a spaceship or another dimension or another planet. Who knows where they needed the gold, or another part of the world. So they would bring the gold up from the giant gold mine that is below Adam's calendar. I spoke about it in the lecture, and I believe they would just bring the gold up, put the gold there in the machine, which is what we call Adam's calendar, and then beam it wherever they wanted it or needed it to be used for whatever they needed to use it there for. So I believe that's what Adam's calendar is all about. And was humanity cloned there? So no, humanity. Adam's calendar was more of a ritual place. That's not where they performed the actual cloning or the research with the genetic material and so forth. That happened in different sites, and we've got a lot of advanced knowledge and shamanic downloads and past life regressions about other sites, other ancient stone circle ruins that were among the original genetics labs that were set up by the Anunnaki here. Some spectacular information, pages and pages and pages of shamanic downloads by especially my good friend John Paul Eagleheart from Melbourne, Australia, that has been here many times. And we've done many shamanic journeys to the stone circles, Adam's calendar, Great Zimbabwe, Tsodilo Hills, all the way northern Botswana, which is another cloning laboratory site for the Anunnaki. That was probably one of the most brutal and evil cloning places that one could align with the island of Dr. Moreau. And I wouldn't be surprised if Tsodilo Hills in northern Botswana, which was an island originally, and known as Mountain of the Gods. Okay, so don't be surprised that that's most likely what it was. And even Credo Mutwa told me that that's where the Anunnaki, the rogue Anunnaki, got together and they started to cross species, blend species, humans with lions and all kinds of animals. And I suspect that that's where the whole idea of Island of Dr. Moreau may have its origins. So Adam's calendar was really just a ceremonial place where they inserted, according to Credo Mutwa, the fertilized eggs of the new species into the first 7 Anunnaki females, who then became the birth mothers and gave birth. And for many years, several thousand years, the Anunnaki females actually gave birth to these new slave creatures, these beings that were the slaves in the gold mines, until they then created the cloning chambers and started to clone them in the cloning chambers. But that's a whole nother story. Wow, we're running out of time. I think we've run out of time. So on that note, I'm going to say thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for joining Contact in the Desert. If for much more information, join my video channel, go to michaeltelinger.com, sign up to my video channel where there's ongoing research, discovery as it happens, that I put the videos out there as often as possible. There are also interviews, there are lectures and presentations, and much more. So thank you. Thank you for your ongoing support. I hope this gives you a lot more insight into the ancient vanished civilizations of Southern Africa. And when it's possible again, come and visit us, come and see me, come and take a tour, see the Stone Circle Museum, and be here present in this ancient site that was created by the Anunnaki some 300,000 years ago and even further back in time. Until next time, this is Michael Telinger. Bye for now.